Senate Leader, Okwayemi Bamidele, Deputy Senate Leader, Senator Dave Umahi, Chief Whip, Ali Nduma, Deputy Chief Whip, Lola Ashuru, Minority Leader, Simon Devo Mwatkom, Deputy Minority Leader, Oyewumi Olarere, Minority Whip, Darlington Wokocha, and Deputy Minority Whip is Rufai Hanga. So that's a roll call of some of the names that the President of the Senate did announce, as you saw in that report put together by Linda. But for the principal officers in the House of Representatives, you've got the Majority Leader, Julius Yonvere, Deputy Majority Leader, Halims Abdullahi, Chief Whip, Bello Kumo, Deputy Chief Whip, Adewumi Ononuga, Minority Leader, Kingsley Chinda, Deputy Minority Leader, Aliyah Madiki, Minority Whip, Ali Isa, and Deputy Minority Whip, George Ibizimawa. So those are the names of the principal officers there. But shortly after that, the chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Blair Damu, did speak, and as you also saw us highlight in our opening this morning in the dailies, he flatly rejects that list, saying what you just saw, he treats it as a rumor. He says the list of those principal officers announced by the leadership of the two chambers of National Assembly is unacceptable. He said there's a convention, there's a procedure. It's supposed to have been selected from the Secretariat, but it didn't come from the Secretariat, and as such, he considers it as a rumor. So those are some of the undercurrents of what is going on. But joining us this morning to talk about some of these matters here in the studio is Senator Bassey. He joins us virtually today. Senator Gershom Bassey was a member of the 8th and 9th Senate. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Yeah, Chamberlain.
Okay, so you're not new to this kind of developments in the Senate. So just go ahead and tell us what your impression is of all of what you've seen playing out in the Senate for a start.
Well, the National Assembly and the Senate in particular has a mind of its own. And normally there are attempts to influence the goings-on in the Senate. But from my experience, the Senate is its own, has a mind of its own. And what usually happens is that the Senate works closely with the party or whichever parties are interested. And that is how they reach some kind of understanding. But primarily, it is the Senate that takes the lead. So in this case, I think the Senate is in order. I think they have taken the lead. They have elected or nominated their principal officers, and that's in order. In the case of the majority party, I think that they have done well. They have very qualified people and experienced ranking senators in office. The slight concern is probably in the case of the minority parties, where some of the leadership are all new senators. But they're also experienced legislators. So even though they are new, they have rank. Okay. So they should be able to do the work.
All right.
Okay.
Before we go on to further take a look at these key persons and who they are, a little bit of the background and the import of their appointments, the chairman of the party did say, look, he received the president of the Senate, the deputy president of the Senate. Then the next day he received the speaker and the deputy speaker. And then you'd have thought that, all right, probably ahead of the announcement of the resumption, they might be working together. Only for him to come up and say, no, this list didn't come from us, so this is unacceptable. What becomes of this list? I mean, what is the implication of his position, his stance on this announcement? Does it change anything?
Like I said before, the Senate takes the lead. And normally what the Senate president announces is what subsists. It's very difficult for outsiders to come in and tell the Senate how to run their business. Normally, out of courtesy and out of convention, the Senate would carry the party along. It's a handshake. So both but in this case, there's really not much anybody outside of the Senate can do. They can put pressure, they can complain. But I think primarily it is what the senators decide that will take precedence. So
yes, go ahead.
So it's an internal matter of the APC, and I think the APC will have to find a way to resolve it internally.
But then looking at the list of both the minority and probably the majority leaders, but if you go first with those of the minority leaders who were announced, and excuse me, and how, yes, they have some legislative experience, but from the House, a lot of those who are appointed, who are announced, and then they are not exactly rankings and first-timers in the Senate, as it was. So is there any significance? You think this must have been carefully thought out before this announcement was made?
Well, as you have reported, Channels has reported, there was a closed session before this announcement. So clearly, if there was a closed session, then my thinking, or from my experience, it means that there were issues to be resolved in the closed session. So the idea of it being carefully thought out, I'm not sure that would actually apply here because they went into closed session. With regards, do you want me to talk about their experience? Or
yes, please.
Well, with regards to their experience for the minority, I think if you look at our rules, clearly the senator who is the Senate minority leader has rank because there are two planks on which you have rank. One is a repeating senator, and two is coming from the House of Reps. So he's coming from the House of Reps, and therefore he has rank, and so he is qualified to be a minority leader. You recall that in the 8th Assembly, we had the current Senate President as minority leader, even though he was a first-time legislator. So when it comes to the principal officers, the idea of rank is really for you to have the capacity to do the work. That is really what it's about. It's not like when you're talking about the presiding officers, where rank is really one of the prerequisites for that job. But when it comes to the principal officers, we talk about rank in terms of your capacity to do the work, and that is really an internal thing. So yeah, they have the capacity to do the work in terms of the minority. And as I've already said, in terms of the majority, Bamidele Okweyemi he's been in the House of Reps, and this is his second term as a senator, second consecutive term. Therefore, he's overqualified to be majority leader. And of course, Ali Ndume has been there. I think this is his 5th term in the Senate, consecutive term in the Senate. So he's really qualified, and so on and so forth. The only person there that is a new senator is the former governor of Ebonyi State, but he's only operating in the deputy capacity. And as a deputy leader, he will be able to quickly understudy what the leader is doing and what the others are doing and come up to speed. So I think I must congratulate the 10th Assembly. So far, so good.
Senator Bassey, okay, so let's step back a little bit. I mean, the emergence of the President of the Senate and his deputy was in line with the advice of the party, that's APC. Now, these other principal officers that were announced, of course, you've heard the reaction of the chairman of the party saying, hey, I wasn't carried along in this announcement, so to speak. What is obtainable normally? I mean, you've been there, you were in the 8th and you were in the 9th Assembly, so before you've been there, so to speak. So tell us, what would be the right or the normal process that should have happened before this announcement were made?
Well, like I have said, look, it's usually a handshake. The party and the parliamentary party work together, and these things happen. But the truth of the matter is that it is always the parliamentary party that takes the lead. But they work along with the party. And so I'm sure they'll resolve this internally. But I think once the parliamentary party has pronounced on this, there's very little that can be done except the parliamentary party itself changes its mind.
The parliamentary party being the members of the National Assembly?
Yes, being in the case of the Senate, being the senators. And except the senators change their minds. there's very little that an outsider, an external force can do.
So what happens, yes, in this case now being that when there was that argument about who should occupy the position of the president of the Senate and the deputy, there was that argument. The party wanted certain people wanted the current president of the Senate, but the senators themselves were asking for an opportunity to choose their own. Eventually, they went along with the party's advice, as I said earlier. But in this case, that is not working out that way. How do you think this relationship will go? I mean, unless, as you said, the Senate decides to change their mind. What would the relationship between the senators and their party be like?
Well, like I said, this is an internal problem for the APC, and I'm sure that they will find a way to resolve. I mean, we all know that the APC are the ruling party, so they have enough levers to press. I mean, of course, the number one person that can resolve this, if he so decides, is the president himself, the president of the country, who is an APC member and former leader of the APC. So you have that lever, and you have other levers that they can press to resolve this issue. So I would put too much flesh. I mean, it's a I don't know. It's
okay. So for the opposition,
it's a normal political issue, and it will be resolved, I'm sure.
But for the opposition parties that you belong to the PDP, and one would think that the opposition will be happy that okay, now the APC's ranks are sort of like in. Not exactly in disarray, but in somewhat of a disarray. One would think that the opposition parties will be happy, and now we have room and we have inroads into this structure as it is. Is that working out for you and your party?
No, I think I haven't consulted or spoken to anybody in my party. But I think before I'm a party member, I'm in Nigeria. And the most important thing is that Nigeria is at a crossroads right now. And the most important thing is for Nigeria's institutions of power to be working optimally. That is the most important thing. And so I don't think we should be playing politics with this type of situation. The most important, I think we want our Senate and our National Assembly to be functioning optimally so that it can complement whatever it is the executive is doing. And
talking about, if I may come in here, talking about the institutions and how they function optimally, the amended constitution gives the president 60 days to submit his list. If I stand to be corrected, about 60 days ago, submit a list of those for nomination into the office of ministers and all of that. Do you think the legislators are ready to get this done? I mean, as soon as they were inaugurated, they took 2 weeks off, which is a normal thing for them to settle in. But they are back now. What are the things you think they should be looking at with that really get things going real quick to get Nigeria off the ground where it's been, especially as regards the economy?
Well, you've asked several questions there all in one. Yeah. If we talk about the functioning of the Senate itself, there are certain committees that have to be formed immediately. Those are, I think, within 14 days, you have to form those committees. Public accounts, legislative compliance, and so on and so forth. There are a number of very key committees. So that's the next item on the agenda. After that, of course, all the other committees have to be constituted. But in terms of, I mean, you were asking about the ministerial list. I'm sure, I mean, there's nothing to the work is quite straightforward. So I think that as soon as I was a member of the Constitution Review Committee that made those amendments to the Constitution and brought in the 60-day rule so that we do not delay the country unduly in terms of formation of government. So I'm sure that as soon as the president sends his list to the Senate will be ready. And normally those confirmations and those things are done in the committee of the whole. They're not sent to the subcommittees. So even though there may be no committees, the full complement of committees may not be available. You'll find that because it is a committee of the whole, the entire Senate will be able to sit down and clear those ministers if they so find them fit.
So, Senator, the numbers in the Senate, those who belong to different parties, I mean, yes, we see that the APC does have 59 members, but all the other opposition put together about 50 of them. Do these numbers, do they count for something on the floor when you get in for deliberations and such things? Because yes, they've also announced the principal officers, but how do these numbers usually play out, and in what circumstances could they be useful?
Well, normally numbers count when it comes to voting. And as you know, there are certain thresholds for voting. In some instances, you require a simple majority. For instance, if you're clearing ministers, they could take a voice vote and do a simple majority. But in other instances, for instance, in a constitutional amendment, there may be some amendments that require certain thresholds, like 2/3 and so on, where you need to call for the division in the chambers. So that is where numbers become important. Or for instance, if you're talking about impeachment, in impeachment, there are certain thresholds if you want to impeach certain officers, both in the executive and even in the legislature. So in those circumstances, numbers become extremely important. But in terms of debate, usually the Senate President will call senators that are interested in contributing. So it's numbers now become less important because you are contributing as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And if you have something to say, usually the Senate President will allow you to say it. And so, of course, in terms of Senate committees, you would have thought that committees will be shared almost along the lines of at least the ruling party will probably have more committees than the opposition parties because they are more. And that is more of an arithmetic thing than any other thing. So, I think that normally the numbers account or are very important when it comes to issues of voting.
For these principal officers who have been announced, because yes, we usually see lots of contestations for those positions, how they earnestly want to occupy those seats. So does it really affect their constituencies? Of what benefit is it if they have to make laws and impact on those who elected them?
Well, the principal officers, first and foremost, most of them are members of the selection committee, which is probably the next committee that will be constituted. It's one of those key committees that must be constituted within 14 days, what is called the selection committee. The selection committee is the committee that constitutes all the other committees, and it's usually made up of the principal officers. Now, if you are a principal officer from Cross River State, my state, and you are in the selection committee, then you will have an influence, or you'll have influence when it comes to determining which committee comes to your state. You will have that, and and you'll have influence in determining committees that go to other states as well. So principal officers can be important in that regard. Although normally there's a formula, they try to be fair to all states and try to be fair to all persons. But then you can have 3 committees in Cross River State and 3 committees in, say, Bayelsa State. But the 3 committees will not be carried, at least to the normal person. Those 3 committees may not carry the same weight. Some committees will be heavier than others. So you can have influence in terms of that. You can also have influence in terms of influencing other things that may come to the Senate. But generally, those things are because what the leadership tries to do is to be fair-minded, and so that influence can be a bit are just nuanced. Those are nuanced. The influence is nuanced.
Okay. Senator Bassey, good morning from Lagos. The list is interesting, no doubt, and you've been in the Senate before. I'd like you to give us an aerial view, particularly with regards to what political undertones may have been responsible, particularly for the emergence of a particular name in the list. That's Senator Dave Umahi, who is a former governor of a southeast state. There are other names there, that could have, taking the position of deputy majority leader. Senator Ali Ndume, for instance, he's a long-time senator, 5th time, as you rightly observed. And there are other senators as well who are experienced parliamentarians, Senator Ningi, Senator Dixon. So what could have been responsible for, the decision of the leadership of the Senate to pick Senator Dave Umahi as deputy majority leader?
Well, I'm not inside the Senate and I'm not part of the APC caucus, but I can hazard a guess. And normally you would say, first of all, David Umahi was the chairman of the Gospel Akpabio campaign for Senate President, so that gives him some consideration. Of course, the second thing is that he's from the Southeast, and the issue of spread is also very important. And then the third thing is that he's coming in a deputy position, So for a person like Ali Ndume, who I think he was also co-chairman along with David Umahi, I want to believe that he had an option on what he wanted. You remember that Ali Ndume was leader of the Senate in the 8th Assembly, so he has already been a leader, and so he chief whip is a substantive position. So maybe that was his thinking. The other thing you talked about regards other high-ranking senators who are not in the leadership. It's an option. You could be offered minority leader, you could be offered chief whip, but it's up to you. You may say, no, I prefer to be chairman of the committee. I don't want to be in leadership. That's your prerogative. So it's not that when you are, it's not, it's always, there's always a give and take and always a discussion. And I know that in my experience, a number of people have opted out of leadership and said, look, they don't want to be in leadership. They prefer to be committee chairman. So that's the way it goes.
But you know that the National Assembly as a whole places premium on the ranking principle. How will this go down well? Will this go down well with other senators who consider themselves ranking and more deserving of leadership positions, in the principal capacity, rather than a first-time senator?
No, look, Senator Godswill Akpabio was our minority leader in the 8th Assembly. And yet there were other more ranking senators, people who had been there, James Manager, George Thompson, Sikibo, also other high-ranking members of the 8th Assembly from the zone that the minority leadership was zoned to. But we opted to go with all of them. Opted to go with Godswill Akpabio. So it's not unusual to have high-ranking senators or back or support newly ranked or newly ranked or lower ranked, no, not lower ranked, but less ranked senators. So it's a normal thing. They will accept it. They will be happy with it if they were consulted and they were carried along, and the business of the Senate will continue.
I wonder if you saw the papers today. Some couched the headlines to suggest that the Senate leadership went with Wike's men. In fact, the House of Reps leadership specifically went with former Governor Wike's men. And there is this concern that the governor is heart and soul with the ruling party. And as such, his men who have been picked will not offer that much needed opposition to the leadership of the House. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, the whole concept of offering opposition, I've always found it to be more of I think, playing to the gallery. The whole idea that just because you're in another party, you must always be opposing what the ruling party does. I find that a bit. I think that the overriding concern must be the interest of the country. And if issues come to the Senate and they are in the best interest of the country, then there is no reason why the so-called opposition should not go along with it. However, if they see contributions they can make to enrich those issues, or they can make contributions that can ensure that those issues, or or they're totally, those issues they feel are not in the best interest of the country, then they can come up and say, look, we don't agree with this. So I'm a bit careful when it comes to this concept of opposing everything that comes from the executive or comes from anywhere. That's the first thing. The second question that you asked, the second issue that you raised, which is the Wike issue. I don't know. I know that the fellow in the House of Reps had contested for, I think, minority leader in the 9th Assembly, and he was not successful. And so, having come back in the 10th Assembly, maybe he still had the ambition to be minority leader, and therefore it was natural that he would contest. That's the way I see it. So I'm not sure about which factor is which. In the Senate, like I have said, they had a closed door session before coming out with that list. And therefore, I want to believe that that closed door session must have resolved a lot of issues, and that fundamentally, the leadership that emerged must have been the choice of the minority senators. Otherwise, we would have seen a lot of pushback or blowback. So far, I've not seen much blowback from the minority senators. So, that's the way I see it.
Well, Senator Bassey, I mean, it's interesting. One of the things that comes to me, and I don't know how you see it, you may want to respond to it, that once you're a senator, always a senator. I mean, if you are a journalist and you can always go back. I don't know if you can say the same thing for a senator. You can always go back if you want to, but you may want to respond to that. It's just on the comic side. But, you know, the one that interests me is something that you said repeatedly, the ruling party, the ruling party, the ruling party. Now, there are those who will be wondering whether or not the Fourth Republic has really been able to make as prominent as expected the role of the party in making decisions for the country. I always go back to the previous republics, particularly the first 3 republics that we've had. The party supremacy was very strong, such that it's the policies or the initiatives or the manifestos or the plans of the party, the programs of the party, that the elected officials always play up. In the First Republic, in the Second Republic, even in the Third Republic, it was so, although botched at some point. So, but what we have in recent time is perhaps one of the reasons a number of people are saying, how come the leadership of the leadership of the National Assembly is not going by the dictates of the ruling party in this? Do you see that as something significant in our polity generally, irrespective of whichever political party it is, at the federal or state level, where the position of the political party, upon which platform they got into office, may not be as strong or solid as that of the individuals who are elected into power?
Well, if I understand what you're asking, you're talking about, like you say, party supremacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that once you're elected, first of all, parties should be encouraged to have manifestos. And those manifestos give a broad general outline of what they intend to do. Now, what they intend to do and what they find when they get into office, I'm talking about the executive now, even the legislature, may be 2 different things. You may believe that the debt of the country is X, but when you get into office, you find that it is X, 3X or 4X when you get into office. So, and you must govern. So, the most important thing is the country. Once you are elected, the most important thing is the country, or the state, or wherever it is, or local government, or wherever it is you're elected to serve. That is the most important thing. The party manifesto and even the party the party interests should be secondary.
But doesn't that also raise an issue, Senator Bassey? Because if the political party that is seeking a job, because that's the way it should be, the political party is a platform seeking a job to make a country or a state better. So if the political party is not aware of the issues they're going to tackle when they get the job, why should they be taken seriously? So it begs the question of whether or not there are some things that need to be readjusted in the polity. So whatever policies are come up with by a political party should be good enough for the country. Otherwise, why stick the job?
No. Look, let me give you a very clear example that all of us have experienced. COVID. COVID was in nobody's political manifesto. It was not in anybody's political agenda. But COVID happened. And we, especially us in the Ninth Assembly and the last government, had to react to COVID. And of course, we reacted by providing budgetary funding and all that. But these were outliers. These were events that we did not, nobody could have included in any manifesto. So that's why I'm saying that once you are in government and once there is governance, then you have to govern. You cannot now start talking about, your manifesto is in the background. It gives you a general compass. It's a general compass, as it were. But in terms of governing, you must deal with the realities of ground. And so I think that political parties need to understand that as they go along. The idea that the political party will dictate to the government doesn't make sense to me, and I don't think it is practiced like that in other territories around the world, other jurisdictions.
Senator, I mean, you spoke about you being in that committee that adjusted the requirements, the timeline within which the president has got to send a list of his ministerial nominees. Well, hopefully that might even happen next week. Who knows? But are they, or will he, or will the Senate, or should the Senate expect that he will attach portfolios to those names when he sends them to them?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right. He is not required to attach portfolios. That is for sure. Because of the obvious reason, which is that portfolios can change. But he's not required to attach portfolios. But I think that I agree to a large extent with the argument that attaching portfolios, at least initial portfolios, to the names will make the job of the senators better or easier or more effective. Because if you say that Mr. A is going to be Attorney General, for instance, then we are able to have a more useful engagement when we engage with him in the clearing. If you say somebody is going to be Minister of Works, you can really engage with him on issues that will eventually come up when it comes to, say, budget defense and all that. You can engage with him and get his mindset on key issues that have. So I think, yes, you're not required to, but personally, I would like a situation where the president can attach the initial portfolios of these nominees as he sends the names to the Senate. It would be a more useful engagement for the Senate.
All right, Senator Gershom Bassey, member of the 8th and 9th Senate. Thank you very much indeed for your time here this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.